Welcome back to CompSci. And today we're going to start going through our options. So we're talking about option C.1, which remember option C is web science, and C.1 is all about creating the web.
Now, you'll see there's limited information in the slideshow. The majority of the information would be in the notes. So make sure you go through the slideshow, watch this video obviously, but also make sure you go through the notes. Don't just look through the notes for the answers to the practice questions that we gave you. Those are just practice questions to give you an idea of what questions would look like. We don't have to give you a question on the quiz that looks anything like that one. Well, it looks like it, but doesn't have the same material. Because there's so much information, we can't give you all the practice questions at once. You would never have enough time, and then we would have nothing to ask you on the test or quiz. So make sure you go through the notes also. All right.
Let's go.
Yay.
All right, so the first thing we need to talk about is the difference between the internet and the World Wide Web. Now, for a lot of you, those two things are probably synonyms in your head right now, but there are some differences that we need to make sure that we understand. The internet is the entire network of computers.
You are a part of the, well, not you as a computer, but your phone in your pocket, the computer you have at home, the laptop you have at home, your devices that are connected to the web are a part of the internet. Every device that connects to the web is a part of the internet.
So everything that's happening within that, that's our big, broad internet. The World Wide Web, or www, that you see in front of all of the URLs that you type in, is the actual system that you're using to access websites. So that's more specific to the HTTP and HTTPS, and all of those websites you're accessing are the World Wide Web, whereas all of the devices and everything else involved is part of the internet.
You don't have to be a part of the internet and access the World Wide Web at the same time. There are ways to be a part of the internet without actually accessing the www. I mean, that could be a question that you could try to figure out. How could a computer be connected to the internet but not the www?
So think about that one, and if you have questions and want to talk through it, come talk to us about it. But take some time to really kind of process that and see what you can come up with first.
The evolution of the web. We got Web 1.0, Web 2.0, and Web 3.0. Web 2.0 was a very big evolution, and it was also kind of big in education. Like, how are you going to integrate Web 2.0 skills into your teaching? And it was like, well, we do that. But anyway, so Web 1.0 was very simple. That's basically when I was a kid and the web just started. You had like your dial-up connection where you actually had to like plug your computer into the phone line, and then your mom or dad couldn't actually make a phone call, and you had to listen to all those crazy sounds, which is, I think, is funny because now like those sounds are like memes and like, oh, who remembers that? Oh, I do.
I remember that. I'm not that old.
Some people don't. But, you know, Web 1.0 was very simple. And please, go and watch these videos. They are very helpful in figuring out what Web 1.0 was like. It was really like, you access a website, there's some information there. You weren't really allowed to post any information yourself. You had to kind of trust that the person posting information who had access to posting information, like had a server and a domain and all the other stuff, you had to trust that that stuff was legitimate and, let's say, factual. Otherwise, it was just like random people putting up weird stuff.
So then we had Web 2.0, which became a lot more interactive. There's a lot more user-created information. That's when all of these social sites started coming out. Not just necessarily Facebook and Twitter and those, but blogs, wikis, all of those different things are also considered social websites where you have users creating content, which you never had before. So that was a big part of Web 2.0, as well as a lot more multimedia. So you had a lot more videos, audio, all of that stuff starting to be accessed through the web that never was before.
Yeah, and not only that, you now have access to putting up anything really wherever you want. You want to film a video, like this one, and post it on YouTube, go right ahead. No one's going to stop you. You may have some kind of access rights denied, depending on what it is you're posting up, but you have access to post anything you really want. And that is also kind of a drawback. If anyone's posting anything they want to post, what do we have to actually do to figure out if that stuff is factual, if it's correct? How much of it is opinions and how much is it actually true? Like, for example, filming this video right now, we don't have to say anything that's true. I mean, we would like to because
Right.
we are trying to teach you this information, but we don't have to say anything that's true, and we can post it on YouTube, and other people could be watching this video and be like, hey, they are completely wrong. But that's kind of up to you to decide. Now, Web 3.0, I don't really know when the switch over occurred or is occurring still to this day. Web 2.0 is still kind of evolving, and Web 3.0 is starting, I guess. I don't know if there's a real start, like this is when Web 2.0 ended, and now we're in Web 3.0. I don't really know, but really it's just everything is super connected now. And again, watch the video, it'll explain more about Web 3.0.
There's a lot of different terms that you need to know, right? These are different, most of them are acronyms.
Sorry.
The only one that isn't an acronym is JavaScript, but they're all acronyms and you need to know them. There are notes on them, and we are going to ask you to really research them. You need to look into what they are and truly understand them. So what we are going to recommend that you do is you make some sort of presentation, flashcards, something for all of those terms that you're able to explain these 5 things.
There are online flashcard systems already out there. Don't go and try to create your own. But you can find some of these terms already in flashcards. And if you need to add some, go back one slide. If you need to add some, go ahead and add some. But I really want to just quickly point out JavaScript. JavaScript's not something we've really talked about much in this class before. What I will say is that depending on who you talk to, JavaScript, they'll tell you that JavaScript and Java are completely different languages. And it's kind of true. But when you look at them, they look the same. So I don't really understand how JavaScript and Java are very different and how people can say they are not the same language when I feel like they're kind of related. But that's just my opinion. Again, this is Web 2.0. I can say whatever I want. So it's my opinion. But do look at the JavaScript and figure out what it is used for. I wouldn't worry about learning how to code in JavaScript. Just figure out what it's used for and what it does. That's really it.
So as you go through each of those terms, you're going to write out the full term, the acronym, what it stands for, the technical definition, and then take that technical definition and put it into layman's terms. Put it into simple, basic terms that you can easily understand and someone else could easily understand. If you have trouble getting from the technical definition to the layman's terms, talk to us. We'll help you. We'll help you get there. Describe what it's most useful for, so that with JavaScript, like he was talking about, figure out where it's actually used, and then try and find some sort of an image or an example or a screenshot of how it's used and helps you define it. Sometimes images can help make a definition a little bit more concrete than just words.
There's one that I would add, and I don't know if it's on any other terms list that you need to define, but one that I would add would be PHP. We're kind of in the middle of right now figuring out how much PHP you need to know, but I would start now figuring out what PHP is used for, what it stands for, and how it's used. But as far as coding in PHP, I don't think you really need to do it.
We are going to do another short video on some of the basics of PHP, just so that you can get a little bit more familiar with it, because in some of the questions, as I'm sure some of you have seen already, there is some PHP language. And you need to be able to interpret it, and it's not too complex what they're asking you to interpret, but we will go through that in a separate video.
Now, I will tell you that those questions, you can interpret what PHP is saying, the code in PHP, without really knowing PHP. So.
All right, so we have a couple different components of web pages that you do need to be aware of and that you understand.
We've kept this short, though, because you've seen this in your HTML coding. You know there are tags for HTML. You know that you have to have, well, don't have to, but you should have some kind of navigation bar. You know that there has to be content on your website. You don't want to produce a website that is just blank. That would make no sense. And then there are others, too. So go ahead and look into, well, what else should be in a website? You should already kind of know. You've been accessing web pages
Probably most of your life.
Entire life now. I haven't, but you guys probably have. So you should know what a web page would have and what different types of web pages there are and what those different types of web pages have or should have.
Which is exactly what we're going to get into. So there's different personal pages, blogs, search engines, forums, so many other different types of sites.
Wikis.
And what you need to be able to do is think about the different structures of them. What is the difference between how a blog and a search engine are going to be created and their main features? There's some very big differences there.
Search engines. I just want to talk about that because when I was writing the notes, I remember there are more than just Internet Explorer Edge and Mozilla Firefox and Google Chrome. There are a lot of others that we don't really use, and we don't really know their names of because they're not so widely used. But just do a quick search on Google of different search engines, and you'll find out how many different search engines there are. But think about what would have to be similar for a search engine. You would want some kind of box to paste in your words for your search. You would also want some kind of button to click to say, hey, go search my stuff. And then also, you would want kind of similarities between what they return. You don't want to search for, I don't know, pictures of cats and not get pictures of cats.
The other thing you have to think about is which are static and which are dynamic pages, which is what we're getting into next. There's these two main types of pages that we can look at. You can have static pages, you can have dynamic pages. Static pages don't really have any user interaction. They are what they are, they tell you information, and that's what it is.
I'll tell you that most of your IAs, if you're coding in HTML, most of your IAs are going to be static. Why? Because they're easier to produce. You're making a website for your buddy who has some kind of company, and you just want to get his content out there. Maybe you want to get some kind of contact information out for that person, but other than that, there's not much user interaction other than just getting information and seeing what that person has done or will be able to do for you. But then you have a whole bunch of dynamic web pages, which I will say are kind of harder to code. Now, if you're trying to make a dynamic page for your IA, good luck, but we're here to help you. You will have to actually incorporate some JavaScript, maybe some PHP, and there are others. So you might want to look into how to code in PHP, how to code in JavaScript, at least the basics to figure out what it is that you need for your IA.
So that's why a static page is easier to code, because you only need HTML. You can code the entire web page just in HTML.
Maybe CSS. Just make
maybe
it
a
look
little
better.
bit of CSS, but that's just for the looks. As far as dynamic and it actually being interactive so that users can have some input into it and maybe give you some information and add to things, that's when you're going to need to add the JavaScript in with HTML or any of these other things. So that's why static is going to be easier than dynamic, and what you should be doing is you should be going back to these different pages and thinking about which of them are static, which of them are dynamic, and why. Try and figure out how they are. The next thing that we're going to look at is client-side and server-side, which you're going to think about static and dynamic pages as we talk about them.
So you got client-side versus server-side. Now, just to break it down, what's the difference? Well, client-side would be any kind of coding that's done kind of on your end. You're not actually coding, but you're interacting with the page. So that would be client-side scripts that the page has to run because you're interacting with it. Client side, because you're the client. But then server side is anything that's done kind of in the back end where the server itself is actually producing all of that kind of script to run the website. So most of your static pages are going to be all server side, where most of your dynamic pages are going to be a good mix of both.
So that client side is when the user is interacting with it and changing things on the page. It's coming from the client. That's your client side.
So what you should think about would be after you read the notes about client and server side would be, well, what are the advantages of client side? What are the disadvantages of client side? The things that you should be thinking about would be security. How secure would a client side script be? Server side, not just security, but also what would be the disadvantage? You're kind of stuck in just a static web page.
You're not getting that feedback and that interaction from clients who are actually using it. So you have to think about those different things and try and come up with some answers to these questions. And that is it.
Wow.
So that's topic C.1. You have the basic outline of all of the notes. As we said, there's tons more notes on OEO class in the course if you read through all those notes pages, just to add more information to all of this. Try and answer the different questions we were asking you in here. Have conversations with each other about them. Have conversations with us about them.
Have conversation with OEO about them.
And then you do have those C.1 questions. There's 2 main questions with a couple different parts of examples of what IB questions might look like on topic C.1. So make sure you are getting those in by Thursday the 15th. That's the date of your quiz. So you should probably hand them in a little bit earlier than that so that, again, we can have conversations and give you some feedback on your answers. But if you have any questions, please, please, please come find us. And as we said, we're going to make another short video on PHP and the basics of it so that you understand how to read a little bit more of it.
And we're always here for you for extra help. Have a great night.